Welcome to United for Impact, a series from United Way of Delaware. Across this country, communities are coming together to solve some of our biggest challenges: ensuring children read on grade level, preparing the workforce of tomorrow, and supporting ALICE and working families who are doing everything right but still struggling to get ahead. This series brings you real conversations with United Way leaders from across the nation who are driving bold solutions, forging powerful partnerships, and proving what's possible when communities unite around a common purpose. Because when we work together, impact doesn't just grow, it multiplies. So let's get started. I am super excited to have Michael Williamson with me, my colleague from New Orleans. Michael, you want to introduce yourself to our audience?
Hey, Michelle. Hey, thanks for having me on. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Williamson. I have the privilege and pleasure of serving as President and CEO of United Way of Southeast Louisiana, right here, headquartered in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Hey, Michael, we've been talking a lot about education, but education is the key to helping families thrive. And I know in your community, you are doing amazing work around empowerment centers for families. Talk to us about how you have transitioned your strategy and why are they important?
So we learn, and I appreciate the question, first of all. So let me dive into the question, Michelle. But so we learned through the creation of our Blueprint for Prosperity that families require a host of things to live out, an economically prosperous life. And we like to say their version of prosperity. And we also knew there are gaps when it came to providing services. And so we took the charge of saying, well, how does United Way fill those gaps, and how do we coordinate, services, not just the programs and supports we offer, but also through our partners. And so our prosperity centers was our step into that arena, if you will. And now I'm proud to say we have 5 centers, soon to have 6 in the next few weeks. And so it's become an important part of our strategy and our efforts to help, which are our bold goal: 100,000 individuals below the ALICE threshold get on pathways to prosperity by 2035.
So you mentioned Alice. Who is Alice?
Yeah, we talk about ALICE a lot, like you, I'm sure, but these are hardworking families that, by every measure, are doing all the right things. Oftentimes, working more than one job just to try to make ends meet. But they're one, crisis, a natural disaster, or just a personal crisis away from falling into financial hardship. ALICE is an acronym. It stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. I often say it's a study of financial hardship. It's the Cliff Notes of financial hardship. But it tells us, and throughout our region, is that 1 out of every 2 households are ALICE, and there's just one small crisis. You hit a pothole in New Orleans, you damaged a tire, a few $100s later, you're in financial peril because you didn't have that money in the bank and you were already struggling to pay your bills.
And we know we too focus on Alice in our community. And I've been really intentional to make sure that Alice feels celebrated, right? Because you know that Alice is hardworking, goes to work every day, works one job, maybe two, but really just needs a hand up, not a handout, in order to be able to help their families thrive. And so when you think about the Alice families that you're helping, what is the biggest barrier to preventing them from getting ahead, from your perspective? And what's the one biggest thing your community is doing to help them to be able to overcome?
Well, yeah, Michelle, I'm glad you pointed out that we should celebrate ALICE. These are essential workers. These are folks that care for our small children or our aging parents, who might be, in a care setting or healthcare setting. These are essential folks. The getting your coffee. Oftentimes, our baristas are ALICE, and a host of other careers or job fields that are essential for us to be able to show up and do our jobs, every day. And so I'm glad you mentioned celebrating, those individuals. We've learned through our work, being boots on the ground, and we like to talk about moving at the speed of need and really meeting Alice where they are, that the challenges, there are many that they face, but one is we saw that, prosperity is not achieved through programs. It's achieved through pathways. But the keys to pathways are programs that offer supports to Alice individuals as they move along the pathway, to stay on that pathway to, a good job, a career, being more upwardly economically mobile. And so the integration of programs and services, I think, has been a significant, or the lack thereof, has been a significant barrier to Alice households. And so I'm very proud of the work that we're doing to try to create those pathways and those supports. But we know it's been a significant challenge for Alice households. And I would go back to, to your second question, like what we're doing in Southeast Louisiana. United Way is certainly leading the charge by opening up prosperity centers, these one-stop shops for financial capability and economic mobility. But at the same time, our state has launched the Louisiana One Door to Work model, which really creates an opportunity for us to partner different with workforce and economic development, which gives me a tremendous amount of hope, because in order for our region to thrive, we have to help Alice households move from surviving to thriving.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point, right? I mean, there is this interconnectivity between education, the workforce, financial empowerment, rather than seeing them as separate issues. And I know that's the case in Delaware. Um, I we don't call them financial, we don't have centers per se. We do Stand By Me, which I'm proud to say has just celebrated its 15th anniversary in our state, where we've helped about 40,000 Delawareans um, improve credit scores, decrease debt, sorry, increase savings, purchase homes, purchase cars for going back and forth to work. And that the interconnectivity, maybe when we started 15 years ago, we might have seen this as financial empowerment to the left and some of our workforce development and education work, to the right, versus now we're really trying to see what does it take to look at our families that we're serving in a more holistic way. What are the resources that they need? Are they eligible for? How might 211 help? When we look at our education work, we are intentionally trying to provide free camps for parents in the summer who are Alice so that their kids too can access the programs and services that would normally be out of reach and unaffordable, right, for them. And then how do we help to bridge and connect them to opportunities where they might select a different career, or at least are aware of what a career path looks like. And I'm sure you're probably doing the same thing in your community. But talk to me about where employers have fit into our models. United Way, employers has always been the foundation to us, from a workplace campaign to making donations in our strategy. But this is an area, right, where we are helping to empower and to strengthen and to help their workforce thrive. How has your interactions with the employer changed as we move more down this path?
Well, let me start, Michelle, by saying we know your Stand By Me model. We've watched it from afar, and I know your community should be very proud of the work that you've been doing for the past 15 years to make that model such an important part of your community. And likewise here, in Southeast Louisiana with our prosperity centers and the replication, similar work, et cetera. So we're excited to model things like you're doing right there in Delaware. Yeah, the question regarding our relationship with business, you couldn't have picked a better timed question, Michelle, because, for a long time, to your point, we relied on businesses, workplace giving, corporate campaigns to support and provide the fuel for our work. But now the conversation has shifted, I think, healthcare. Like, how can United Way help healthcare institutions address the fact that in some cases their workforce may be 30% Alice.
Mhm.
That they want them to pursue opportunities for advancements within healthcare, but their employees run into significant challenges. Navigating resources is one, but also things like the benefits cliff, which has been studied heavily by the Federal Reserve Bank, which tells us that the way our benefits are structured now can often be an impediment to economic mobility while employers are looking for employees to grow within their workplaces. United Way can come in with our Alice data, do more research, and offer best practices or models for how they can meet their employees where they are and address some of those barriers. And to be clear, it's not all about money. We've seen healthcare increase wages. That's fantastic, but employees also need flexible schedules. On-site childcare or subsidized childcare is essential. Helping them meet their transportation needs because oftentimes they're traveling a long way to work. And then they have their own healthcare issues, mental, physical, behavioral health, all the things. I talk about Alice like this. Alice needs all the things, just not all the time. And in order to establish a pathway, working with employers is essential to help individuals, pursue economic opportunity, which is something I think we all want. We want everyone to live out the American dream, but not everybody starts in the same place, and not everybody needs the same things. And we recognize that once again, we can't program our way out of these challenges. This is really about pathways, and corporate partners and employers are such a significant part of that solution.
So, what trends are you watching that could significantly impact working families in the next few years?
Well, I don't want to get over my skis here, but some of the trends that I think about is certainly artificial intelligence, its effect on the workforce. We're seeing across the state of Louisiana, massive economic development wins, data centers that are being built. Are we equipping Alice households, their children, even the caregivers, with the tools and skills they need to pursue those opportunities? Once again, we have to do that in partnership with employers and government. The state of Louisiana plays an essential role in the workforce and economic development ecosystem. They're leading the charge, and we're now at the table with them. And I think that's one of the trends. I like to say I see that with our United Way colleagues like you across the country. You're at the table with employers and economic development leaders talking about the things that we can do to ensure that we have a ready workforce. What better workforce could you have than the pin-up power of Alice? In our communities, 50% of our households, they're just on the edge. But with a great job and competitive wages, we can unlock so much of their potential.
Yeah, I think that the AI and technology and I think the research says, right, a large percentage of the jobs that will be out there in the next 5 or 10 years haven't even been created yet. But what we do know is automation is going to play a key part in that work and what it might take to get families to be able to thrive. My guesstimate is it's going to shift, right, around the expectation or the education level, the competencies that our families are going to need to be able to be prepared for that future workforce.
Yeah, it is. I mean, clearly, and we've said this, it seems like we go through these cycles as a country where we don't know what the next 5 to 10 years is going to look like from a workforce, requirements standpoint. But we do know we have a fantastic, public education system. We have great colleges and universities throughout our region that are all thinking about the same thing. But the real power is when we all come together, public sector, private sector, trying to predict and talk about the tools, the skills that individuals need. Our job at United Way, we're not a workforce organization. We're not an economic development organization. We're not government. We're the voice of Alice. And we want to make sure that as these decisions are being made, as careers are being planned, that Alice is central to those conversations. Once again, so we can unlock the potential. We've done studies on that and just the economic upside to bring in Alice into competitive, jobs that pay competitive wages provide a huge boost to our gross domestic product, will support increased economic development, workforce growth in ways that are unimaginable. And maybe, in my lifetime, Louisiana can find itself at the top of some of the good lists versus the opposite, which is kind of where we often sit now.
And we know usually we want people in our community, right, to give, volunteer, and advocate. How can individuals um, help us to work with Alice? What does that look like in your community? Have you been able to directly connect volunteerism, community engagement to helping Alice families thrive?
We certainly, to your point, regarding how do we help individuals in our community that want to help, get connected in ways that they can help in our community. And I kind of liken it to this, Michelle, like because our Alice data tells us, we just have our new release of data, that 49%, so basically one out of every two households are Alice. The bad news is one out of every two households is Alice. The good news is one out of every two households aren't. And we sit at the intersection of the two. Our ability to connect individuals that are doing okay to folks, to your earlier point, just need a hand up. They're not looking for a hand out. They're looking for some support so they can achieve economic mobility and prosperity. And we sit at the intersection of doing that. So people through us, and like your United Way, they can give. We want folks to contribute. That's the fuel for the work that we do and that our nonprofit partners do. But also bring your voice to the table. Help us advocate for the types of policy changes that are needed to see real change at a systems level, which can only be done through public policy, both big P and little p. And of course, you mentioned volunteerism. We have our United Way Hands-On Volunteer Center, which is supported by our friends at Ochsner Health, and that's a way for folks to say, listen. I don't have a lot of spare money to give, but I have time, and that's valuable too. How can I lend that? And we deploy volunteers across our region on all sorts of projects that save schools, funding, so they don't have to pay for paintings and playground repairs and upgrades, a whole host of ways that folks can get involved. But I would say you can connect in all three ways or one way, but we welcome you in any of those ways.
Yeah. So as we kind of come to a close, I always think, our work is sometimes both challenging and so rewarding at the same time. What keeps you up at night?
I tell you, I think about this often. It's just the fragmented systems that we force families to deal with, both the public sector and private, like nonprofits like us. We're guilty sometimes of, not always design our programs that exactly meet people where they are. And we're doing better. But I think the fragmented systems, the benefits cliff as a major policy challenge that we have right now is the thing that I wake up every morning thinking about. Because until we fix that, until we recognize that the $1.24 trillion we spend as a country on public benefits is organized in a way that supports pathways and not as a barrier, not as an impediment. When those systems work together, God, we can unlock so much potential. But I think about that every day.
So the flip side, what gives you hope?
God, I love your questions. United Way gives me hope. It's, the fact that there's an institution that's 80 years old, 100 years old plus across the country and around the world that's dedicated to helping hardworking families by every measure doing all the right things. And the fact that there are, millions of people out there that give and they advocate and they volunteer, like that's got to make us all hopeful. And I think in a world today where let's agree, it can be fairly polarizing, but our human nature and our human instinct to help each other is alive and well. We need to shed a light on it because that's what gives me hope. I see the beauty in people every day, and it's like it makes me thankful to be able to do this job, which is more than a job. It's a calling.
Yeah, let me close. I echo that. Last week we had the opportunity to celebrate our 80th anniversary, and we decided to focus and call it the Road to 100. So we actually had our younger generation lead the entire program. So our board chair and I started it, but we passed the mic, the baton to a younger generation, and then they passed it to an even younger generation. And so that was so inspiring to me because we have individuals, young people that are doing such amazing things right now that are helping people that have empathy and compassion and they're volunteering and they're setting up programs to help read to kids. And they themselves, right, are on pathways and tracks that will get them to a livable wage job, right? So that maybe they circumvent, they come right out, right, from Alice from the beginning. And that gives me so much hope to know that the legacy of this organization and the legacy that's being built in our community is in good hands. It will be. It currently is in good hands, but we're connected to great hands that will continue to be able to do that.
I was going to just say, Michelle, that's a testament to your leadership, and I know the world-class team that you have right there in Delaware. And what a great way to celebrate, focused on the future versus, focused on the past. So, like, congratulations. Yeah, I consider you a friend, and not just a colleague, but a friend. And I'm just glad I get to do this work with you. We're doing the hard work, like we say,
Right.
Way of Southeast Louisiana. It's a pleasure to be able to do it alongside of you.
I feel the same way. And I thank you for joining us today. And to our listeners, if you want to know more information, where can they find out more information about your United Way specifically?
Oh yeah, check us out on all things social like Facebook, X, and Instagram. You just look for the handle at United Way SCLA. And of course, you can visit us at unitedwayscla.org. Just check us out. We got a lot going on here in Southeast Louisiana.
Yep. And in Delaware, you can go to our website at www.uwde.org. And we encourage you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for United for Impact. At United Way of Delaware, we believe real change happens when communities come together to solve problems that no one organization can tackle alone. If this conversation inspired you, share this episode, subscribe to the channel, and join us in building stronger readers, a prepared workforce, and a future where every Alice working family can thrive. Because together we just don't imagine a better future, we build it. Communities united, futures transformed. See you next time.